So Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is the prequel to Mad Max Fury Road. And prequels always seem, people always complain about this with prequels. Like, like what's the point of them when you already know what's going to happen to these characters? Like, you already know Furiosa's going to live to see Fury Road, and you already know that nothing bad is going to happen to Immortan Joe in this film. You know what happens in Fury Road, but nothing horrible is going to happen to him in this prequel film. So, like, prequels are hard to care about, but, it's a film directed by George Miller, so I had complete faith in it, and my faith was rewarded. What can I say? George Miller knows how to explore more of this Mad Max world that he's crafted, and I think a big part of that goes to just, realizing that, like Mad Max himself felt like more of like a vessel within Fury Road for just exploring all the other cool stuff that Fury Road had to offer. Because, like, yeah, he was a bit of a driving force, but there also wasn't a lot to his character. Furiosa, however, is an interesting character who does have a more unique backstory and, like, a great mythos to her that gets established within this prequel film. Like, what sets this film apart immediately from Fury Road is that it has a different dynamic with how it's set up. Because Fury Road, the biggest criticism that everyone had with that Mad Max film was that, it's one long chase. It's one long convoy chase. And it's like, yes, it is, but it's a badass convoy chase, and it's the best chase I've ever seen in a film. And Furiosa shifts gears by not making it about a chase, but about like an epic adventure that spans across many years. So while Fury Road just felt like a long extended chase, like Furiosa's film is actually diced up into chapters, and it's got narration, and it has like stories and legends behind it, and you get to explore more of the Mad Max world rather than focusing on like one tiny niche of it. And that potentially, like, this was my biggest fear with films, like, that potentially could be dangerous to explore too much of this world, because then if you reveal all of its secrets, it doesn't become as compelling. But I think having, the focus be on Furiosa and how she grows up within this environment, it engages you pretty quick. Because, like, within, like, the first few minutes, you're not constantly thinking about, how does this line up with Fury Road? You're thinking about, you're watching this young Furiosa being whisked away by this motorcycle gang, and you're worried about whether or not, not so much whether or not she'll survive or that she'll find her way back to her colony, but whether or not she'll reveal her colony to her attackers and risk the life of her people. So there's tension immediately from like the first scene when like they're zooming across dunes, and like there's knockdown drag out fights with motorcycles, and it's beautifully shot, and it's intense, and it sets the entire tone for the rest of the film. So Furiosa basically wants revenge in this film against her attackers, who are led by the forces of Dementus, played by Chris Hemsworth. And, Dementus, I thought, was a very interesting villain, because, like, on one level, you could just play up how silly he is. Like, you could go, like, full Lord Humongous route from, like, the second Mad Max film, but just making him, like this dorky guy who embraces, like, the absurd, like, treasures that he finds in the wasteland. And I almost kind of got that impression just like how he's framed. Like, he's got like he's draped in kind of like this Jesus attire, with a teddy bear attached to him. And make no mistake, he's a pretty big dork. But he's a dork in the sense of how he embraces his style and leads his people, because, like, at his core, he's also like this very nihilistic villain, because, like, I like the fact that they establish him as someone who has lost loved ones. Like, he's kind of gone down like that Mad Max route of having, lost his family in all the carnage, and basically just wants to try to make sense out of a world that doesn't make sense, which is why he kind of adopts Furiosa, forcibly adopts Furiosa into his clan. And again, another danger that I worried about is like, oh no, are they going to try to load up, Dementus with pathos, where, you know, you're meant to feel a little bit more bad for him, or, you know, are they going to lean too much into like the goofy side to make you not think about it? And there's a pretty good balance of both here. Like, he's still a dork. He's still someone that you kind of like laugh at for like his absurd tactics that don't go to plan, and what he embraces about, you know, might within his people. But also, you know, like, they highlight his bitterness and how he's kind of like become this nihilistic villain who realizes the emptiness of revenge, which makes him far more fascinating once Furiosa finally catches up with Dementis and achieves her goal of finally making Dementis pay for having, you know, killed someone who meant a lot to her. So, you know, Furiosa, played by Anya-Taylor-Joy, they make great use of, like, you know, framing her within this film and giving her very few lines of dialogue, akin to Mad Max, but not fully. Like again, another criticism that a lot of people are probably going to have about this film is that they're just framing Furiosa like Mad Max, which is not the case here, because Furiosa actually, instead of just, you know, embracing revenge and just kind of like, you know, killing another bad guy and walking off into the wasteland the same way that Max does, Furiosa actually embraces, you know, other people and tries to find someone to fight for and remain there for them. In the same way that she was in Fury Road, because in Fury Road, she was not just going to defeat the villain and then leave the way that Max always does in the Mad Max films, but she was going to remain and be there for, like, the women that she rescued from Immortan Joe. And they set that up in Furiosa. Like, it's not the main thrust of what she's doing here, but it does paint her as a more interesting hero than Mad Max, because like Mad Max is more interesting as kind of like a as like a mythical hero that people tell stories about, where it's like the stories seem more legendary than the figure himself, whereas Furiosa, she has a little bit of that, but they kind of embrace like the more genuine parts of her that make her a hero who's going to fight for people and stick around to defend them, which makes her a far more fascinating hero. The action scenes, you know, it's George Miller. Do I have to tell you that they're intense and they look badass and they're a lot of fun, and like they get really inventive with the various vehicles and the motorcycles, and there's people coming from the air, there's people underground that are chopping up people, and it's everything that you would want to see in a Mad Max film. And for exploring more of the world, it's genuinely fun. Like when they go to places like, you know, like the Bullet Farm and Gastown and all the little details that again, like, they're not explaining all of it. They're just giving you glimpses of it while there's because like every time, because like when they actually do go into like Gastown and the Bullet Farm, it's all action. There's a chase immediately. There's violence. There's carnage. There's explosions. There's cars crashing into each other. And there's the silent Furiosa, played by Anya-Taylor-Joy, just kicking ass and actually being, you know, being brutalized. Like that's another thing I want to focus on too, is like Furiosa is interesting because of her vulnerability, I think, and how she forces herself through this meat grinder of revenge and doesn't come out fully unscathed. Because like the one thing that I was looking for in this film, you know, waiting for that moment to happen, is because like we know that Furiosa has a mechanical arm in Fury Road. So I was waiting for like, when is that moment going to happen? And it happens at like one of the more unexpected times in there. Like it's not built up like, you know, like they focus entirely on her hand and say like, oh, this is the moment where she gains her arm. Like it's actually treated as a progression of the story, instead of like just slowing down, zooming the camera and say like, okay, here's how it connects to Fury Road. That's not important. Like I care about what is happening in this film and giving me a reason to care about Furiosa, and how, you know, and how there's like a feud between Immortan Joe's forces and Dementis's forces, and Furiosa just trying to find her revenge and survive any way that she can in between. That's the stuff that's exciting. That's the stuff that's fun. And that's everything that you get in Furiosa. And it's just as badass as Fury Road. And dare I say, just because Furiosa is a more interesting character than Max, I would say this is even a better film, just by like a little bit more, just because it becomes radically different. It focuses on a much different character with greater themes, and tells its story in a much different way within this same universe, with all the stuff that you've come to expect, with like Immortan Joe, and his war boys and his convoys, and like all the other returning characters, like the people eater and all that. You get all that fun stuff, but there's still like some excitement in the air when you're, when you're intrigued to see where this goes next, and who's gonna live and who's gonna die, and what's gonna come next in the chases. Like at one point during one of the convoy chases, the war boys talk about this weapon they've attached to the back called the Bobby Knocker. And they build it up throughout, because like there's one war boy, small one in the back, who just keeps saying, do I engage the Bobby Knocker? Can I do it? And like, no, not yet. Just like, we don't want to use it up yet. And he just keeps asking and asking and asking. And by the time they do finally get to the Bobby Knocker, it is pretty exciting. They use it at just the right moment. And just like with like the amount of like the heavy body count and all that, it is just so satisfying. It is such an exciting, like, epic adventure within like this post-apocalyptic world that manages to conquer like this Herculean feat of not making you constantly comparing it to Fury Road. Which again, like I said, it's much easier because it's a different type of film, a different type of character you're focusing on, despite all the other returning characters, and it feels like an almost completely different film, even with because then they actually do play a few clips from Fury Road at the end of the film, and even with that, I'm still not thinking about like constantly comparing it to Fury Road and like matching it up. Like it feels like an entirely separate film within its own world that works and just engages you as much as it did with with Fury Road, and especially for a film that arrives 9 years after that last Mad Max film. It feels like a fresh return. Like it felt like it was worth the wait. I know that the Furiosa film has been in the works for years, but it was definitely worth the wait. I think George Miller, he's just made another banger here.